Fellas, welcome back. Today we are talking about the new Markiplier movie, Iron Lung. Now, I'm just going to jump straight into it. I just saw the movie. It's recent on my mind. Let's talk about it. Is this movie good? Yes and no. And we're going to get into that. I'm not going to go into any spoilers. Overall, I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed my time watching the movie. I'm going to go over why. I'm going to go over some pros. I'm going to go over some cons that are completely spoiler free, and then we're going to talk about more spoiler stuff, and I'll give you guys a fair warning before we get into spoiler territory. But here we go. Let's just talk about it. For one, the pros of the movie. Honestly, this movie is beautiful for the most part. Like the movie is shot very well. As you guys may or may not know, the movie takes place in like one setting, and they just found compelling and new interesting ways to keep that one environment interesting. Like it was never, in my opinion, boring. It was never boring looking at this same space because they use different camera angles and different shots to keep it compelling and interesting. And I really enjoyed that about the movie. I was never bored with this movie like once. It was very interesting from start to finish. The movie always had me on the edge of my seat where I was constantly eager to find out what was happening and what would happen next. Now, that's not to say that there aren't boring parts. I mean, I'll get into that more later. Even with those boring parts within the movie, it still compelled my interest, and I was still interested in everything going on around me. So overall, I think it was good. Like it did a good job of keeping me entertained. The music overall was good. Sound design was also, for the most part, pretty good. I didn't pay attention too much to the music, but I think that's just a testament to how good it was because it did a great job of like fitting the vibe. It did a good job of taking me into this world and bringing me into this movie, I guess. That the music kind of took a back seat, but not in a bad way. It took a back seat in the sense that it helped bring me into this universe, into this world, and made things more intriguing. And I think they did an excellent job when it comes to that. And the sound design, for the most part, was really good. There was never a moment that I, heard something and it felt off, if that makes sense. Like everything sound design wise brought me more into this movie and immersed me deeper and further into the project that Markiplier was making. I'm not going to get too deep into it, as I do want to keep this spoiler free, but I did like the complexity of Mark's character. There's a lot of moments where it explores Mark's character, the character he is playing, and the complexity of this character and the confusion the character has in his own mind about who he is, and we get to see that unravel in real time. And there's parts of the movie where I don't even know if I can fully trust our main character, like trust his judgment. And in most movies, I feel like you take every character for them at word, if that makes sense. But what I really like about Mark's character is I was constantly on edge, not knowing if I should trust our main character, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll go into it deeper when I get into more of the spoiler territory. But overall, Mark did a great job of making this character interesting and complex, and I was always interested to see where this character would go throughout the movie. Another pro about this movie is Mark's acting. Now, at first, I'm not even gonna lie, it took me so long to separate, hello everybody, I'm Markiplier, with the character in the movie, because I grew up watching so much Markiplier that it was really hard for me to separate Markiplier from our protagonist, our character. And that's not a testament to Mark's acting. If you ask me, it's just more when you build an association with someone's character. It would be like watching Adam Sandler not be Adam Sandler, like trying to be a completely serious character. I think he was a completely serious character in a movie called Uncut Diamonds. I never watched that. It would just be weird. It would just feel wrong. Okay, and that's more of what I'm trying to drill home. It just, I see Markiplier's face and I'm like, that's Markiplier. I expect him to be like, hello everybody, Markiplier here. But that didn't happen. He didn't throw any of those, which very disappointed. He could have slipped it in there somewhere. No, I'm just kidding. But overall, his acting was actually pretty good. I was thinking in my head, I'm like, huh, I wonder if he's like been taking acting classes, because he always plays the same character in most of the things he does, or a similar character. But in this movie, he's playing a very serious character and very offset from how I see Markiplier as a person. And overall, I think he did a really good job of betraying this character. Last thing for the pros, overall, I like the characters in this movie. I like their complexities. I like how they're introduced. I wanted to learn more about the characters, and I like the characters. There was never a moment where you met a character and I instantly disliked them. There was never a moment like that. I actually loved all the characters in this movie, and I think overall the acting was good for being like an indie film. The acting was overall pretty good, and that leads into, sorry, my next point that I forgot to mention. But this movie feels like it doesn't feel like an indie film. It feels like a movie that a studio could have actually made, and that's where I would really applaud Markiplier. Is genuinely, this movie feels like a movie. I don't know how else to describe it, but it felt like a theatrical release. They took every ounce of budget they had and made this movie pretty good, if you ask me. All right, I have some neutral points. These are some points that I just wasn't like, I'm not upset over. I'm happy with them too. I'm in the middle. Don't judge me. First and foremost, the movie at times can be boring. I talked about this earlier, but I'm going to set it now. The movie at times can be boring. What's nice about this is it actually adds to the film rather than taking away from it. The boring parts helps build the suspension and builds the atmosphere of the world. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad thing, but I'm going to tell you right now, this movie isn't for everyone. If you get easily disinterested or bored and it's hard for you to sit through boring parts to get to, the climax or the more interesting parts of the movie, it might not be a movie for you. But I do think these boring parts are necessary to build the atmosphere, build the world, and overall, I think they did a great job of scaling from boring introductions to interesting climax area, if that makes sense. Although I feel like it didn't take away from the movie, there were a lot of times I could not hear what they were saying. Like, genuinely, they would say lines, and I have no clue what they were saying. I don't know if this is because the movie was originally not planned to be that big of a theatrical release. I think initially it wasn't even planned to be in theaters. So it might have been more meant to, watch with headphones on and stuff like that. So these hard hearing parts wouldn't be as bad. But with the sound of design and everything, it's just, there are some parts I just couldn't hear. And I asked the people I was watching the movie with if they felt the same way, and they did. So like, it wasn't just me. Genuinely, if I were to rewatch this movie, I would love to rewatch it with captions. Once again, I would say it doesn't take away from the movie, but it did make what was going on confusing at times. All right, let's talk about the cons. What's wrong with this movie? What is wrong with this movie? I'll start out by saying the movie can be a little lackluster when it comes to storytelling. There are parts where I feel like it could have expanded more on what was going on and did a better job of expanding on our characters, the setting, all of that, because it gives you throughout the movie like bits and pieces of the story, and you kind of have to try to piece them all together. But even then, I feel like it would have been better to at least have a little more exposition, if that's the word. I don't even know if that's the word, but if they explained a little more, like don't completely dumb it down. Like, I'm not a child, but do, make parts easier to digest, I guess. Like, the whole movie doesn't need to be this puzzle that I need to piece together. It can still have these elements where I need to piece things together. It's like, oh, that makes sense. But I wish they did a better job of at least explaining things before jumping into the movie, I guess. Like, I wish we had a better idea of what was going on before we jumped into the movie. If I'm making sense, like, I can't help but ask that. I know I'm not asking a real human being. You know, you're watching this and you physically can't answer until I post the video, but it still helps me to ask. I don't know. Anyway, the movie can be confusing at times. I don't know if this has to do with, you know, piecing the puzzle together, or like I mentioned earlier, some parts being hard to hear. There's just times I really didn't know exactly what was going on. Like, I had an idea of what was generally going on. Something could be happening and it doesn't do, in my opinion, a good job of explaining exactly what's going on. And we're left to put those puzzle pieces together. And I don't know how to describe it. There's just times where the movie can be confusing and maybe not easy to digest or understandable. And that's okay. It's not like the end of the world. I don't think this is a huge con, but it is something, like I said earlier, I wish they worked a little harder on. Now, I did mention that I think the acting overall was good for an indie film. And I overall do think the acting was a pro. There were moments where I felt like the acting took me out of the movie, whether it was Markiplier's character or actually some of the other characters that are in this movie. There were moments that maybe their acting wasn't stellar, and it took me a little out of the movie, and it made me realize it hurt the immersion of the movie. It was like, oh, this is a movie. Where there's some movies you watch where you're completely immersed, you forget these are actors, you see them as characters. I didn't feel that as much with this movie. I felt more like, oh, these are actors playing a role. And that wasn't the whole time. There were times where I was truly actually immersed with our characters. But other times where, you know, I was like, oh, these are actors playing a role. And that I feel like could be a pretty negative con at times, because I feel like the point of a movie is bringing you into a world, immersing you in what's going on. And I feel like at times it didn't fully do that. And last but not least, for the non-spoilers part, I didn't like the end of the movie. I feel like they could have expanded on it more. That's it. I'm not going to say anything else. If I go into anything else, that's spoilers. Just, I wish they expanded more on the end of the movie. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Don't sue me. Overall, I think Iron Lung is a good movie. I enjoyed my time with it, and I think Markiplier actually knocked it out of the water for his, like, first theatrical release. I think he did a great job directing. I think he did a good job acting, and I personally would recommend this movie to some of my friends. And with that being said, I'm going to rate this movie a 74 out of 100. Why the 74? I did some math based on how I felt. Don't ask questions. It's a 74 out of 100. Leave me the fuck alone. That's how I feel about the movie. I did want to get into some more spoiler territory, talk about some things a little deeper, a little further, mostly on the negative side. So if you don't want any spoilers, click off the video now, or else you're going to get stuff spoiled for you. All right, mostly the cons. Let's go back and talk about them. The movie can be lackluster when it comes to storytelling at times. There are just moments where I want to know more about our main character. I can't really remember his name, but there's just moments where, you know, it gives us bits and pieces of his past. But I really do wish we spent more time elaborating on that rather than just trying to puzzle it together. Because, you know, it took me a while to even realize he's basically struggling. There was an incident that he was the cause of many murders. And the movie's constantly hinting at he's not that great of a guy. He caused these injuries. But he's convinced it wasn't my fault. There's people that led to this. I may have played a part, but it wasn't my fault. I wasn't trying to hurt those people. And never really elaborates what that means, you know. We don't know his extent when it comes to this incident, and I wish there was more clear of a verdict if he actually was guilty for what he did in that incident. And just more elaboration in general, because I felt like it led to some confusion on my part. Speaking of confusion, puzzling things together can be cool and all, but like, guys, fellas, ladies, gentlemen, sometimes I don't want to piece every little piece of a movie together. I want to sit there and be dumb. I'm American. I just want to be told stuff sometimes. But I felt like every part of this movie was me trying to piece things together and understand it more. And while that can be cool when it comes to those lore breakdown videos on YouTube, it's not as cool when you're watching it. Like I said, I don't think this took away from the movie. I think the movie was overall good. But come on, we could have not made it as big as a puzzle, I guess, and more linear. Rather, it felt a little not linear, and I felt like that hurt the movie a little bit. And that's my personal opinion. Some of the acting, like I said, kind of sucked. There's the characters he meets up with. It's the girl and the speaker. And I don't know why she put me off at times. So did Markiplier, but I already mentioned that because it's Markiplier. I'm used to him, blah, 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 blah. But the Ava, I believe her name's Ava, her character, she felt like an indie actor at times. And I'm not trying to say she did a bad job. I just think when he went up to the surface, and I think this scene was actually really good because it showed the disconnect between him and them behind this glass. And it never really shows them not behind this glass, but there was just something about her character that just made me feel off. I don't know. Overall, had a good time with the movie. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.